corrupt cop messed with the police chief's black wife without knowing it, then the whole police station was shocked by what happened. Documents. Now. Sergeant Mitchell's voice echoed through the empty supermarket parking lot as his hands rested provocatively on his gun. The headlights of the police car cruelly illuminated Vanessa's face as she calmly held the keys to the BMW. It was 10:30 p.m. on a typical Tuesday when that routine stop turned a simple trip to the market into calculated humiliation. Mitchell had purposely chosen a black woman alone in an expensive car in an upscale neighborhood, the perfect target for his weekly extortion. "This car isn't yours, is it, princess?" He smiled maliciously, examining the perfect documents. "I bet you don't even know who you stole it from. Let's take a little trip to the police station and clear that up." Vanessa Thompson, 34, a prosecutor specializing in crimes against the public administration, remained silent while Mitchell invented non-existent irregularities. During her 12-year career, she had prosecuted dozens of corrupt police officers, but she had never experienced such intense humiliation herself. Mitchell moved dangerously closer. "We can settle this another way. You give me $500 and we forget all about this mess. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult to explain to your boss how you stole his car." What Mitchell didn't know was that those seemingly submissive eyes had already memorized every detail of his posture, every threatening word, every corrupt gesture. Vanessa had learned years ago that true strength does not come from shouting or direct confrontation, but from the calculated patience of someone who knows exactly when and how to strike. As she reluctantly handed over the money to end this charade, a silent question ran through her mind. Could Mitchell really be stupid enough not to research who his victim really was before trying to extort her? The answer would come much sooner than he could imagine. But before we find out what Vanessa had up her sleeve, we need to understand what kind of storm Mitchell had just awakened by choosing the wrong woman on the wrong night. If you're enjoying this story of justice and revenge, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what's coming next will show you that messing with the wrong person can cost you much more than a few bucks. Mitchell woke up the next morning with an inflated ego and an extra $500 in his wallet. The extortion the night before had been so easy that he was already planning to do it again. After all, black women in expensive cars were perfect targets. They rarely had real lawyers and always gave in at the first sign of a threat. Over breakfast at Diner's Corner, he bragged to other officers about how he had taught a cocky little princess a lesson the night before. "You should have seen how meek she got after I explained how things work around here," Mitchell laughed as he added sugar to his coffee. What Mitchell didn't realize was that 3 tables back, Vanessa Thompson was mentally recording every word of that conversation. She had arrived early on purpose at the same restaurant frequented by local police officers, armed with only a book and an impressive ability to go unnoticed. While Mitchell continued his performance for his colleagues, describing in detail how he had invented irregularities in the BMW, Vanessa discreetly activated the recorder on her cell phone. Every cruel laugh, every racist comment disguised as a police joke, every admission of corruption was carefully documented. "The trick is to choose your target well," Mitchell continued, oblivious to the storm brewing a few feet away. "People like that don't have the courage to report it. They know no one will believe them against a police officer." The irony was delicious. Here was a man boasting about crimes he had committed against prosecutors, with no idea that his next victim had direct access to the Internal Affairs Department, strategic relationships with federal judges, and most importantly, a thirst for justice that had been fueled for years by prosecuting people just like him. Vanessa was not just any prosecutor. Specializing in crimes against public administration, she had built her career by methodically dismantling police corruption networks. Her last case had resulted in the arrest of 17 officers from an entire police station for extortion schemes virtually identical to the one Mitchell had just publicly admitted to. But what was most fascinating was that Vanessa was not alone in this mission. Her husband, Regional Chief James Thompson, headed the Internal Affairs Division, the very department responsible for investigating corrupt police officers. James had spent the last 3 years tracking a pattern of extortion in the region, without being able to identify the specific culprits. When Vanessa arrived home that morning with clear recordings of Mitchell confessing his crimes, she not only had enough evidence to destroy a corrupt police officer, she had the key to dismantling an operation much larger than she had imagined. "Honey, you won't believe the gift I just got," she said, connecting her cell phone to the sound system. Mitchell's voice echoed through the room, detailing his intimidation techniques with the precision of a corruption manual. James Thompson stopped reading the reports and looked at his wife with an expression that mixed surprise and admiration. In 15 years on the police force, he had rarely seen such clear and self-incriminating evidence. How many other officers were in on this? James asked, already mentally calculating the legal implications. At least 6. And they all laughed, they all agreed, they all knew the schemes. Vanessa smiled with the satisfaction of someone who had just caught a shark using only a small hook. Mitchell doesn't know it yet, but last night he didn't just extort a prosecutor. He confessed crimes to the wife of the man who is going to investigate him. The couple knew they had a rare opportunity before them, to destroy not just one corrupt police officer, but to use his own confessions to track down and dismantle an entire criminal network within the force. Mitchell continued his routine, completely unaware that his every move was being monitored by a duo that combined intimate knowledge of the legal system with privileged access to the police's internal investigation mechanisms. The question hanging in the air was simple: would a man arrogant enough to publicly brag about his crimes be smart enough to notice the trap that was being carefully constructed around him by two people who had dedicated their careers to hunting down predators just like him? The answer would come much sooner than Mitchell could have imagined, and in a way that would turn his arrogance into utter despair. A week had passed since that conversation at Diner's Corner, and Mitchell continued his extortion routine without realizing that his every move was being meticulously documented. Vanessa had turned her initial humiliation into fuel for an intelligence operation that would have made the FBI jealous. James Thompson was not just any deputy. During his 15 years in the Internal Affairs Division, he had developed a network of contacts that stretched from local police to federal prosecutors. When Vanessa showed him the recordings of Mitchell, James immediately recognized the pattern. This was not an isolated corrupt cop, but part of a much larger scheme. "Honey, I need to show you something," James said, spreading a series of reports he had discreetly collected on the kitchen table. In the last 6 months, there has been a 340% increase in complaints of extortion against police officers in this region. They all follow the same pattern: women alone, expensive cars, always at night. Vanessa analyzed the documents with the surgical precision of an experienced prosecutor. Each case reported situations virtually identical to her own experience, routine stops that quickly turned into blackmail disguised as fines or threats of arrest. "And here's the interesting part," James continued, pointing to a shift schedule. All of these incidents occurred during Mitchell's shifts or those of the officers who were with him at the restaurant that morning. It was exactly the kind of systematic evidence Vanessa needed. As a prosecutor specializing in crimes against the government, she knew that isolated cases were easily contested, but documented patterns were virtually irrefutable in court. While the couple planned their strategy, Mitchell made the most stupid mistake of his career. Intoxicated by the success of his recent extortions, he had begun bragging publicly on social media, posting photos of expensive dinners and luxurious vacations that his police salary could never afford. "Another weekend in Miami," Mitchell wrote on Instagram, posting a photo next to a rented Ferrari. "Hard work pays off. #GoodCopLife. #I'd serve my success." What Mitchell didn't know was that Vanessa had created a fake profile and was tracking every post, every comment, every public display of unexplained wealth. To an experienced prosecutor, those posts were documented confessions of illicit enrichment. But Vanessa's smartest move was to recruit Special Agent Rebecca Torres, a federal investigator who had worked with her on previous police corruption cases. Rebecca was known for her almost supernatural ability to infiltrate and gather evidence. "Vanessa, are you sure you want to do this?" Rebecca asked during a seemingly casual lunch at a cafe near the courthouse. Confronting police corruption always has risks, even when you're on the right side of the law. "Rebecca, he didn't just extort me. He publicly confessed that he does this regularly with other women," Vanessa replied, discreetly sliding a copy of the recordings across the table. "How many other victims do you think there are? How many women have paid for humiliations they shouldn't have had to suffer?" Rebecca listened to the recordings through headphones, her face hardening with each of Mitchell's confessions. As a federal agent specializing in corruption crimes, she had heard many confessions throughout her career, but rarely anything so self-incriminating and detailed. "This isn't just individual corruption," Rebecca muttered, removing her headphones. "This is organized criminal operation. I'm going to need federal authorization for a full investigation." Meanwhile, James had quietly begun reviewing years of archived reports, discovering that Mitchell's pattern of extortion was even older and more systematic than they had imagined. Using his authority as a deputy, he had requested phone audits, GPS tracking of patrol cars, and analysis of patrol schedules that would reveal exactly where and when Mitchell carried out his side activities. Most impressive was that Mitchell remained completely oblivious to the net closing in around him. In fact, his arrogance had grown so much that he began recruiting other officers into his scheme, offering tips on how to identify lucrative targets. "The key is to choose women who have something to lose," Mitchell explained to a rookie cop over another coffee at Diner's Corner, unaware that one of the customers 3 tables back was Rebecca Torres, recording his every word through federal surveillance equipment. Lawyers, doctors, executives, people who would rather pay than get in trouble. The irony was delicious. Here was a man teaching others to commit crimes against exactly the kind of people who had the power to destroy him completely. It was like watching someone dig their own grave while handing out shovels to their friends. Vanessa knew she had in her hands not only evidence to destroy Mitchell, but to dismantle a criminal operation that had likely victimized dozens of women over the years. Each recording, each document, each social media post was another piece of a puzzle that became more incriminating with each passing day. James had discovered through his inside contacts that Mitchell was being considered for promotion based on his excellent productivity rates, essentially being rewarded for his criminal activities disguised as police efficiency. "It's perfect," Vanessa commented when James told her about the impending promotion. "Let's let him get the promotion first. The fall will be even more spectacular when it happens publicly, in front of all his superiors." Rebecca had obtained federal authorization for a full investigative operation, including wiretaps, electronic surveillance, and infiltration. The case had caught the attention of the Federal Justice Department itself, which was interested in using Vanessa's evidence as a spearhead for a much larger investigation into systematic police corruption in the region. The question hanging in the air was fascinating. Was it possible that a man arrogant enough to publicly document his own criminality, recruit accomplices, and brag about extortion on social media was smart enough to realize that he was being hunted by a federal prosecutor, an internal affairs detective, and an FBI special agent working in perfect coordination to destroy not only his career, but the entire criminal network he had created around him? The answer would come much sooner than Mitchell could have imagined, and in a way that would turn his arrogance into absolute terror when he finally discovered who the woman he had chosen as his victim on that fateful night in the parking lot really was. Mitchell's promotion ceremony was scheduled for Friday morning in the main auditorium of the police station. 50 police officers, dozens of family members, and even some local politicians were present to witness what would be the recognition of an exemplary police officer for his years of dedicated service to the community. Mitchell adjusted his new tie, bought with extortion money, and smiled at the crowd. At 42, he would finally be promoted to lieutenant, a position that would give him even more power to expand his criminal activities. What he didn't know was that this ceremony had been carefully orchestrated by Vanessa as the perfect stage for his public downfall. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced Police Chief Morrison, "today we honor a man whose exemplary work on the streets demonstrates the best of our department." Vanessa was sitting in the third row, wearing sunglasses and a scarf, enough of a disguise that Mitchell didn't recognize her immediately. At her side, James Thompson pretended to be just a deputy invited to the ceremony. In the front row, Rebecca Torres was posing as a local journalist, with a fake camera and press pass. As Mitchell took the stage to receive his new badge, his cell phone vibrated with a text message. He discreetly glanced at the screen, and his confident smile faltered for a microsecond. The message was from an unknown number. "Do you remember the woman in the BMW? She remembers you." Mitchell tried to maintain his composure as Chief Morrison continued his speech of praise, but his eyes began to nervously scan the audience. Who had sent that message? And how did someone know about the BMW? A second message arrived. "Check your email now." With slightly trembling hands, Mitchell discreetly opened his personal email on his cell phone. What he saw made his blood run cold. There was a compressed folder attached with the title Evidence, Systematic Extortion Operation. Inside were dozens of audio and video files and documents that meticulously detailed every crime he had committed over the past 3 years. Recordings of his conversations at Diner's Corner, confessing to extortion. Screenshots of his social media posts displaying unexplained wealth. GPS reports from police cars showing suspicious movement patterns. Victim statements. Bank analyses revealing unexplained deposits. The third message was the most devastating. "In 5 minutes, all of this will be delivered simultaneously to the FBI, internal affairs, the local press, and posted on all social media. Unless you have a very creative explanation for thousands of dollars in documented extortion." Mitchell felt cold sweat trickling down his forehead as Chief Morrison continued, an example of integrity and dedication that should inspire us all. The irony was sinister. There he was, being publicly praised for integrity while holding in his hands irrefutable evidence of his own systematic criminality. That's when Mitchell saw Vanessa slowly removing her sunglasses and looking directly at him. The recognition was instant and devastating. The woman from the BMW. The victim he had randomly chosen to extort was sitting there, watching his promotion ceremony with a smile that mixed justice and revenge. The fourth message arrived just as Chief Morrison called him to the microphone. Rebecca Torres, FBI Special Agent. James Thompson, Internal Affairs Deputy. Vanessa Thompson, Federal Prosecutor. You picked the wrong family to extort, Mitchell. At that moment, Mitchell fully understood the magnitude of his mistake. He hadn't just attacked an innocent woman, he had declared war on a federal prosecutor specializing in police corruption, married to the chief responsible for investigating corrupt police officers, with direct access to the FBI. Sergeant Mitchell, please come to the microphone for your words of thanks, announced Chief Morrison, completely oblivious to the drama unfolding. Mitchell walked to the microphone with wobbly legs, his face visibly pale. 50 people watched him expectantly, waiting for his inspiring words about serving and protecting the community. That's when the fifth message arrived. You have two options. Confess publicly now and negotiate a reduced sentence, or wait 5 minutes for everything to be revealed in the most humiliating way possible. This is your only chance to maintain some dignity. Mitchell looked at the audience, then at Vanessa, who was now smiling openly. He knew he was completely defeated. There was no escape, no possible denial, no way to convince anyone that the evidence was false. Mitchell began, his voice faltering into the microphone. I have committed serious crimes against innocent citizens. The auditorium fell completely silent. Chief Morrison looked at Mitchell with growing confusion. For the past 3 years, I have used my badge to extort money from innocent women. I invented offenses, made false threats of arrest, and blackmailed people for personal financial gain. The shocked murmurs of the audience grew rapidly. Mitchell's family members looked on in horror. Fellow police officers exchanged incredulous glances. Vanessa stood up calmly and walked to the front of the auditorium. My name is Vanessa Thompson, federal prosecutor specializing in crimes against public administration. I have documented evidence that Sergeant Mitchell has systematically extorted dozens of women over the past few years. The bomb had exploded. Cell phone cameras began recording. Rebecca Torres, revealing her true identity, began to officially document the public confession. James Thompson took the stage. Sergeant Mitchell, you are under arrest for extortion, corruption, abuse of authority, and criminal association. You have the right to remain silent. As the handcuffs were placed on his wrists, Mitchell looked at Vanessa one last time. She stared back at him with the serene dignity of someone who had turned personal humiliation into systemic justice. You picked the wrong victim that night, Vanessa said loudly enough for the entire audience to hear. And now, dozens of other women you victimized will finally get justice. The ceremony that was supposed to celebrate Mitchell's promotion became the stage for his spectacular downfall and public arrest. Within minutes, videos of the confession were going viral on social media. Within an hour, Mitchell's extortion operation would be headline news on local television. The question hanging in the air was fascinating. Could a man arrogant enough to confess his crimes publicly during his own promotion ceremony have imagined that his downfall would be used as an example to reform the entire system of police corruption in the region, turning his personal humiliation into the catalyst for a revolution of transparency and accountability that would save dozens of future victims? The answer would come in the weeks ahead, when the true extent of Vanessa's justice would reveal itself to be much greater than simple revenge against an individual corrupt police officer. 3 months after Mitchell's spectacular arrest, the police station seemed like a completely different place. The video of his public confession had racked up over 2 million views, making it one of the most documented cases of police corruption in American history. But the real revolution took place behind the scenes, meticulously orchestrated by Vanessa and James Thompson. The operation that began with a simple $500 extortion had turned into the largest police corruption investigation in the county's history. Rebecca Torres, now promoted to special supervisor of the FBI, coordinated a federal task force that had identified and prosecuted 17 additional corrupt police officers using evidence gathered from the Mitchell case. The pattern was systematic, Rebecca explained during a press conference that Vanessa watched with quiet satisfaction. What we discovered was an organized extortion ring that victimized more than 200 women over the past 5 years, generating approximately $500,000 in illicit gains. Mitchell, now serving a 15-year sentence for extortion, corruption, and criminal association, had become an unwitting celebrity among inmates. Ironically, the man who boasted about intimidating defenseless women was now constantly humiliated by other inmates who knew his story from the news. His former partner Manuel, who had cooperated fully with authorities in exchange for a reduced sentence, now worked as an instructor in police rehabilitation programs. His personal downfall had turned into an opportunity for redemption, teaching young police officers about the dangers of systemic corruption. But Vanessa's most elegant revenge was not just the imprisonment of the corrupt, it was the complete transformation of the system that had allowed them to thrive for so long. As a federal prosecutor, she had used the documentation from the Mitchell case to implement the Thompson Protocol, a monitoring and auditing system that would revolutionize police transparency across the state. James Thompson had been promoted to Regional Chief of Internal Affairs, now overseeing the implementation of mandatory body cameras, recording of all police stops, and an anonymous reporting system that allowed victims to report corruption without fear of retaliation. Every police encounter is now recorded and audited, James explained during training seminars that became a national model. Any deviation from protocol triggers an immediate investigation. What happened to Mitchell can never happen again in our jurisdiction. The most delicious irony was that Mitchell had inadvertently created a legacy of transparency and accountability that would save thousands of future victims. His documented arrogance and stupidity had become teaching material in police academies across the country, a permanent example of how corruption destroys not only the victims but the perpetrators themselves. Vanessa had received the National Award for Excellence in Law Enforcement for her work on the case, but the real satisfaction came when she began receiving letters from women who had been victimized by Mitchell and other corrupt police officers. Each testimony confirmed that her personal experience had turned into a systematic revolution. "Prosecutor Thompson," wrote one of the victims, "for years I carried the humiliation of that day in silence. Seeing Mitchell publicly confess his crimes gave me the courage to rebuild my life and trust the justice system again." Most impressive was that Vanessa had turned a traumatic experience into a personal crusade that transcended individual revenge. She had created the Police Corruption Victim Support Fund, financed with assets confiscated from convicted corrupt police officers, offering free legal support to those who could not afford to take on the system. Rebecca Torres often reflected on how a single night in a supermarket parking lot had triggered changes that would affect millions of people. "Vanessa didn't just destroy the corrupt," she commented during interviews. "She completely redesigned the system to protect future victims." 2 years after his arrest, Mitchell attempted to appeal his sentence, claiming that his public confession had been coerced. The appeal was denied in less than 24 hours, with a judge commenting that we have rarely seen such abundant and self-incriminating evidence of systematic guilt. During a routine visit to the prison to document the progress of her investigation, Vanessa encountered Mitchell in the hallway. He tried to look away, but she stared him down with the same serene dignity she had that night in the parking lot. "Do you still remember the woman in the BMW?" she asked calmly, as guards watched them. Mitchell nodded reluctantly, his arrogance completely evaporated. "Good. Because now you understand that picking the wrong victim isn't just dangerous for you, it's devastating for the entire corrupt system you represented." The impact of the case had spread far beyond local borders. Law schools included Thompson versus Mitchell in their curricula as an example of how meticulously collected evidence and intelligent legal strategy can bring down seemingly invincible schemes of systematic corruption. Vanessa and James had become sought-after speakers at national conferences on police reform, sharing not only the legal techniques used to dismantle the corruption network, but also the importance of personal perseverance when the system fails its own victims. "The best revenge is not to destroy those who have harmed you," Vanessa concluded in her lectures. "It is to build a system so solid and transparent that people like them can never again prosper through the corruption of others." The legacy of the case continued to grow. The Thompson Protocol had been implemented in 34 states. The rate of police corruption reports had increased by 300% due to victim protection systems, and public trust in the police had begun to gradually recover through transparency reforms. Mitchell, who had once boasted that no one would believe a black woman over a police officer, had inadvertently proven the exact opposite. His own documented arrogance became the irrefutable evidence that led not only to his own downfall, but to the creation of a system where future victims would have a voice, protection, and most importantly, justice. Vanessa Thompson's story proved that sometimes the wrong person at the wrong time can be exactly the right person to change everything. Her traumatic experience had turned into a silent revolution that would protect thousands of people she would never personally know. The real moral of this story? Mitchell tried to humiliate a black woman for a few bucks, but ended up inadvertently creating an entire system dedicated to protecting people just like her. The best revenge was not just destroying a corrupt cop, it was ensuring that his kind would never again thrive in the shadow of impunity. If this story of justice and transformation has inspired you, subscribe to the channel for more real-life cases of people who turned injustice into revolution.